chairs that are tabling in the back. We have our area with Center for Cultural Power where you can join the tree house of where you exist on the green career ecosystem, have some creative outlets to unwind, recharge, and obviously this station where you're listening to really incredible talks and panels and discussions with experts. And so the next panel is actually an OG Green Jobs Pavilion panel. We've done it at every Green Jobs Pavilion since 2023. Why have we done this session? The session is salary negotiation. Why is that important? Because when it comes to the green job sector and getting into climate jobs, it can be really unclear on what a good salary is. And also, how does one negotiate to get into a good salary or a good paying green job? So we're doing this session to talk about, how can you think about negotiating your salary, figure out what your price is worth, and how you can have that conversation with your employer when you get an offer letter. And yeah, I'm excited to dive into it.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Kristy. Okay, raise of hands if you've ever negotiated a salary before. Raise your hand if you don't know how to negotiate a salary. Okay, we're gonna get into the details of it, but we're super excited to have wonderful panelists. So why don't we actually do a little bit of a quick round of introductions and the work that you do, and then we'll get into it.
Well, I'm Kristy Drutman. I am the co-CEO, co-founder of Green Jobs Board. And as I was mentioning before, I really love this topic because as a young person who was getting into the climate field, in one of my first positions I ever had, it was a contract that I didn't realize I was actually supposed to have more benefits. And I didn't realize how much my colleagues around me were actually getting paid significantly more than me because I just didn't think to ask. And so I find this panel to be really important around the questions that I think everyone should be asking their employers as well as their coworkers. So we build a higher culture of transparency. And a last note on Green Jobs Board, we require all organizations and companies that post with us to post their salary range. Some organizations have not liked that, but it's been really important to us from an equity standpoint to make sure that we're being very transparent about what the pay scale is for the jobs that we're posting on our platform. So yeah, passing it over here.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessica Lindl. I'm wearing 3 hats in this conversation. The first is that I built our sustainability and ESG team at Unity from scratch when we went public in 2020. The second hat that I'm wearing is that I wrote a book about navigating your career like a video game, which is over at the table over there called the Career Game Loop. And there's a whole section on negotiating your worth in that book that I'll touch on. And whatever you don't pick up, please grab the free copy. And then the third is that I'm leaving Unity in a month, so I've just gotten off of the process of negotiating my salary. And I'll give you a few tips from that.
Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Desta. I could wear several hats here as well, I guess. Right now I'm currently a contractor with Amazon working on a human rights project to embed human rights into their global transportation network, so I can talk a little bit about contractor versus in-house. Last year I left a role, I was leading sustainability at Sephora North America. I can talk about that. And then I also serve on the board of the International Society of Sustainability Professionals as well.
Hi everybody, I am Georgi Enthoven, and I am also an author and have a book over there called Work That's Worth It. I also have a podcast under the same name, Work That's Worth It, on any podcast platform that you listen to. And I also coach and mentor mostly young, ambitious professionals that are looking to have a meaningful career, feel fulfilled in the work that they do, but also be compensated well for that work. And that's the corner that I really focus on and specialize and am passionate about.
I love everyone's background here, and I think that kind of gets started with, negotiating salary. I think a lot of job seekers and people that are being interviewed for roles often think that the negotiations begin at the end when you receive the offer. But I think if you can, y'all can give us like a really breakdown of a step-by-step guide of like what exactly is salary negotiation before you're even like applying for a job.
So I want to be really practical in the tips that we provide here. So I think before you even think about the process of negotiating, number one, know the market rate of what you're looking at. It's based on the role, the location, the system that you're in, whether it's a capitalist company or a nonprofit or public sector, and obviously the company itself. And you can find all this information now through any LLM, and it has sources. Number two, don't just go after one job. Make sure that you're going through the process of interviewing with multiple companies so that you can actually be able to compare the market rate of multiple companies and use it to leverage against each other. And then number three, as you start going into that process, make sure that you have the most information. When they ask you what salary you expect in this role, don't answer it right away. But make sure that you've got your information on your own salary expectations and your walkaway point.
I think I would echo some of that, especially if you're looking here in California and New York. There are pay transparency laws, and Kristy has that too on Green Jobs website. So use that as a benchmark, but in my experience speaking to recruiters, they're generally looking to hit the mid-range. So your job is to try to upsell yourself, but don't name the number first. Whoever fundamentally in negotiations names the number first will lose. The second point I think I would say related to interviewing is just don't say, let them tell you what their range is. Ask them, and if they push you to name a number, then say let's, if we have a match here, I'm more than happy to discuss that, but it seems premature. So really try to hold your ground on that and don't give in on the number right away.
Okay, less practical, I'm going to zoom way out. You talked about wanting to know, even before you get to the negotiating table, what you have to do is understand the value that you are bringing to the table. So it's not what you're getting paid at your last job. It's the value that you're going to provide for the job that you are interested in. And sometimes to understand that value, it takes a lot of self-exploration. So we have some external factors that are against us. Let's say often women are paid less. That's an external factor. But we also have internal factors that limit us. You not feeling comfortable asking for what you're worth. You not doing the research to understand what you are worth. So along with all the practical things, I think really sort of understanding your worth, and if it requires having conversations with people in those roles, and especially thinking of an average white man in those roles, what they would expect to get paid, that will give you at least a benchmark of what you can expect.
I love that. Adding on to that, I think having conversations with your peers who are maybe in a similar strata as you, I think was how I built a lot of my financial literacy period. Even friends who weren't even necessarily in my industry, but were around the same level of entry level, just finishing college. I was knowing what my friends who were software engineers were making at the same stage of me graduating, going into environmental jobs. It was a lot different. There was a bit of a wage gap there. But it was helpful to know what is the range of what these positions are looking like. And then now that I'm, more in entrepreneur freelance ring, I now have conversations with my friends who also own companies or do similar work or offer similar services, and I'm like, hey, for those deliverables or for that work you did for that client, how much did you charge for that? And typically I realized early on I was so undercharging because I was like, wait, we did the same project, the same exact deliverable, why am I charging myself 50% what you are? And the thing is, no one's going to advocate for that more than yourself unless you do have those internal advocates, which I also would love to have you all talk about. So I think having those conversations and asking people straight up, it can be uncomfortable. Don't just be like, oh, how much do you make? But just be like, hey, I just was curious, has your salary gone up? Have you qualified for a raise? I want to know for this deliverable, have you worked with this client before? All of that information is really helpful.
I love this information because I think it comes from different perspectives of something that I wish I would have known. And let's talk about the offer letters, which is something that everyone gets excited about. You finally get the job offer, you've gone to 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds of interviews, you get the job offer and you don't like the number, you are offered benefits that you maybe don't understand, and maybe you're given equity in shares and you don't really know, like, you know, is this something that I want, or is it I want a higher wage? So I'd love to kind of maybe if you could share more about your own personal stories or experiences of how you've navigated that.
I'll kick off really quickly because I worked for a company that went public, and I've worked for a lot of companies that failed. So when you're looking at the equity aspect of it, I think it's really important to know the current valuation of the company that you're coming in at. One opportunity that I just walked away from was because the valuation I thought was totally unreasonable of this pre-IPO company, and I didn't want to come in and basically have the equity go down in value after it went public. There's a ton more to say about equity at this point between RSUs or options and strike price and everything else, but in the interest of time, my key message is just make sure if you are offered equity, you know what the valuation is. Oh, and then usually you don't get the offer letter until everybody's verbally agreed, and so make sure that you have alignment on the verbal agreement of what the offer letter is before you actually get it in writing, so nobody's wasting their time.
I'd say get excited when you get the offer letter, but don't take it as the final, right? This is just the beginning of the stage of negotiation, and you need to think about what levers you want to pull. You may or may not have stock options. If you have stock options, you can always ask for more. You can ask for the vesting schedule. You can ask for signing bonuses. There's a lot of ways to bump up what the current offer may be. And then without stock or any of that, think about this is your one and only chance to come in hot, because once you accept the job and you start, you have to expect that you may get equity grants, you may get 3 or 4% increase over your base salary, but that's going to be the slow burn, right? So what you want to do is come in hot once you have that offer letter and hold your ground and negotiate, because they want you now. So if you want to delay your start date, if you want to ask for more things, look at the levers that you can pull and be really considerate around, getting yourself the best possible offer. Don't be afraid.
Maybe in contrast, I will say also look at the climate that we're in. 3 years ago, I was with a CEO that had already trained a young employee, and she had just finished the training period, and then Sunday night she texted him to say, I've taken another job, they offered me more. That was 3 years ago. We're now in a really different climate. So I would just say everything that you've just shared, but also with the context of where we're at. I heard this morning that the average young professional is taking 36 months to find a job right now. And I don't know if that's worldwide, or I don't know where the statistic is exactly from. I think it's from Glassdoor. But we're in a difficult climate. So I always like to think of you're giving value to the company, and they're giving value back to you. And that value can come in different ways. So it can come in salary, it can come in stock options, but it's also working with an amazing mentor, somebody who's really going to change your life and give you access to so many opportunities. So although it is your chance to negotiate, also take a big picture of what are the big movers of this opportunity for you, and don't let them fall away because you're focusing on the wrong thing. There's a book that I love called Getting to Yes. There's actually a 2-book series. It's Getting Past No, which maybe is an important part as well. And then the second book is Getting to Yes. And the yes is to know what you actually really care about and want. And don't get distracted by the things on the side and go down tangents that are potentially going to sabotage your yes.
Good advice.
And I would just say the last thing is just make sure that you're able to ask questions and to do that market research once you do have that offer letter, so that way you're able to look at it and always ask about professional development opportunities, also asking about additional types of budgets, and also asking about what is the the growth trajectory of this role? What is the growth potential? Because even if you are accepting that offer letter in that moment or at that stage of your career, it's really important to know, is my salary going to actually go up in 1 to 3 to 5 years from now, or is that going to stagnate? What is the opportunity there? Because I've seen a lot of my friends who have been in the situation where they were told, oh, there was growth potential, but they actually don't know when they can actually check in with their supervisor for when those metrics are. So it's really good to ask, what is success? Asking that supervisor, that person who is the hiring manager, how do you guys define that? And how do you track those milestones? That way we could keep revisiting this conversation, because salary negotiation, even after the offer letter, it's still an ongoing conversation as you continue to provide value and worth to the organization.
Yeah, I really love of how the different ways that we can view when negotiating salary, but especially the mentorship part. I really appreciate that, because I think when I first pivoted in my own job in sustainability, I remember my manager, she pulled me aside, she's like, you do know you can get paid more. And I was like, what do you mean? The offer letter, I already signed it, it's a done deal. What do you mean I can increase my salary? And she's like, yes, go back and talk to the performance manager. And so I kind of want to ask you, how do you navigate those steps, and what are some of the best questions to frame it to the employers of the opportunities for not just growth, but to negotiate a higher salary once you've already signed an offer?
One of the key things that I emphasize in the book is this concept of job crafting. That the job that you're hired for is not the role that you're actually going to end up leaving and moving on, and that you can actually job craft into a new, entirely different role at your existing company. And the way that you do that is continuing to align what the organization needs that isn't being fulfilled by anybody else, and working with your manager or other stakeholders to see if you can move into actually helping with a specific project or a new area or function that the company is building out. And then using your time on the job to be able to build those skills. And so you essentially end up job crafting into a different role. I'm in my 4th totally different job at Unity over the last 9 years, and it's a really common theme. So don't hold yourself to the role that you're being hired into. Think about how you're going to continue to evolve.
Yeah, and I guess then you can ask for more money, right?
Along the way.
Right, along the way.
Which you do,
Yeah. So, I think similarly, when you're getting an offer, think about what else you can do. When I interviewed at Apple, I was interviewing to lead their labor and human rights team, but the manager was like, oh, and I have stakeholder engagement. I haven't figured out how I'm going to fulfill that. And I raised my hand in the interview and said, I want to do that. I have the experience to do it. I'll take it. And sometimes it wasn't necessarily related to compensation. It was related to what that was going to help me to achieve, right? To lead stakeholder engagement for Apple for their global supply chain was going to be a big opportunity and could lead to some change for the company, right? So it's not just necessarily a personal, aspect. It's also thinking about where you can lean in and take leadership, show up, and then sometimes those contacts, those connections, and what you achieve from it will be recognized monetarily through that process.
So you mentioned mentors. We forget about connection, the human connection that you're having while you're working. Those are the relationships that you're going to take with you to the next job, that enhance your life, make your life better, a nice conversation you have that day. The people that you surround yourself by in your job and in the community that you build needs to be life-enhancing. And that life-enhancing group will look after you and make sure that you have the knowledge you need to progress in your career, as you will do and play it forward for others. So I love that you asked this question about mentorship, because it's not even formal mentorship. It's the people that you create that watch out for you and can open up doors, opportunities, get you to speak at on a panel, get you to go to a conference. All those opportunities. You want to be looking out for each other. You want to be able to find people that create more opportunities for you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I feel like you all kind of nailed it, but I would just say the last piece on that is building off of the mentorship piece actually is asking someone in a position that you want to be in also. And I've had mentors who have told me this is how much I make now, And it's given me a little bit of a North Star to understand where exactly I would want to place myself, both from like a position or a title standpoint or a compensation standpoint, and actually to understand like how do you build that kind of lifestyle? What does that require? Like now as an entrepreneur building Green Jobs Board, I'm now trying to figure out, as a startup founder, now understanding, okay, let me meet with like other mentors and people who have scaled and sold companies now. And now I'm understanding, oh, how much did you make, building that company? What was your exit? Who did you collaborate with? What did you charge? And like you're constantly having that conversation throughout your career. So again, I would like to say that like the conversation is always ongoing, and especially as you are going into like, higher up in leadership positions, as you go through your career, it's really important to talk with others that are in the position where you want to be, just as much as the people that are at the same level as you too.
I absolutely enjoyed this conversation with you all because I think there's a lot of people here that are taking notes, and I think that there's a lot of ways. And my last question, which is like a fire round, which is very quick, was what is one piece of advice that you wish you would have given your younger self when you got your first job offer?
Make sure you negotiate. So many people don't.
I would say maybe 2 small bits of advice. The first thing is stop thinking of myself like as a person and think of myself as a product, and then what I can bring to the market. I think that would have helped to reframe a lot of the conversations and a lot of the emotion that I brought to the table. The second thing I would say is value your time highly. If you want to have an impact-related job, then your time equals value equals impact. Your time plus value equals impact. And if I thought about those 2 things, I think I would have reframed a lot of the emotional turmoil I put myself through.
Be informed. So do the research. It's so easy now. It used to be a lot harder. It now takes minutes. So make sure that you're really informed.
And I would say, like, talk to people you trust, people who can be a sounding board for you when it comes to how to price your value. I think for a lot of us, especially, we're an all-women panel, and that was very intentional due to just pay inequity that exists in all industries universally, but especially in climate for women, and I, as a woman of color especially, and I think it's really important to actually talk to other people all the time who can actually hype you up and be like, no, you are undercharging, charge more. Like I've had friends who have hyped me up when I'm like trying to put together a client proposal or when I have had to negotiate a deal, and they've been like, no, add an extra 0 to that. And I get so nervous and you panic and you have all these like fears, especially those of us who maybe come from immigrant families where we don't have a healthy relationship with money. And I have to tell you, it's really important to understand that money is just energy. Money is your expenditure of what you're sharing and the gifts you're giving to the world. And it's really better to understand that money and having more of it or having access to that wealth is not a dirty thing. It doesn't make you a bad person. In fact, it allows you to resource and give back to your community in a much more intentional way because you can redistribute those resources and be targeted and specific about how you do that. So we need each and every one of you to build that financial literacy, to talk to each other, gossip, be transparent about what you're making, what your employer is paying you or not paying you. Have mentors review your contracts. I think sometimes people think you have to have a big fancy lawyer. Yes, I think having legal advice is important, but also there's people and mentors in your life who probably can read a pretty standard contract because they've gotten many job offers over the years. Ask them to look it over and ask them, hey, is this a good deal or am I getting screwed over? And I think people will really want to support you. So whether that's your family members or a professor or a classmate or a trusted colleague, I think those conversations can really open your eyes and build more self-confidence to ask for what you're worth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. And with that being said, the Green Jobs Board is the nexus for a lot of us here to connect with each other. And please give a large round of applause to our talented speakers. Thank you so much. Thank you. And we'll be transitioning to our next panel, but please connect with the speakers after. They're going to be hanging out over here if you have questions about negotiating your salary.